This is where I live. If we get married today, this is where we are going to stay. I am sorry I cannot give you a better life.
Charity looked around quietly. The house looked old. The roof was rusty. The walls had deep cracks. There was no electricity. There was no running water. The narrow road leading to the house was rough and covered with stones. Tall trees stood everywhere. The place was silent. It was completely different from the beautiful houses in the city. Stanley's heart began to beat very fast. His hands became cold. He believed Charity would turn around and leave him immediately, just like every other woman had done, after seeing how poor he was. He lowered his head and waited for the painful words he expected to hear. Before we continue this emotional story, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our amazing African stories. Also, tell us in the comments which country you are watching from. We love hearing from our viewers all over the world. Now let's continue today's touching story. Several years before that unforgettable day, Stanley was born in a small village in southeastern Nigeria. His family was one of the poorest in the community. Their little mud house leaked whenever heavy rain fell. Many nights, the children could not sleep because they had to move around the room to avoid the water dripping from the roof. Life was never easy. His father woke up before sunrise every morning. Some days he worked on people's farms. Other days he carried heavy loads at the village market. Whenever there was no work, he cut firewood and sold it just to buy food for his family. Stanley's mother sold vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, and local food in the village market. She worked from morning until evening. Yet, after paying their debts, very little money remained. Some days the family ate only one meal. Some days they drank water and went to bed with empty stomachs. Still, Stanley's parents never stopped encouraging their children. His father would always say, "We may be poor today, but education can change your tomorrow. Never give up." Those words stayed in Stanley's heart. Every morning he walked a long distance to school, wearing old sandals that were almost falling apart. Sometimes he could not even afford exercise books, but he studied very hard because he believed his father's words. He dreamed of becoming successful one day. He dreamed of giving his parents a better life. He dreamed of building a home where nobody would ever sleep hungry again. Little did young Stanley know that life was about to test his family in a way they had never imagined. His father's health was slowly getting worse, and the painful days ahead would change Stanley's life forever. The months that followed were the hardest Stanley's family had ever faced. His father still woke up every morning before sunrise, but he was no longer as strong as before. The heavy jobs that once looked easy now made him weak. Sometimes he stopped halfway to catch his breath. Sometimes he held his chest because of the pain. His wife noticed everything. "Please rest today," she begged one morning. "Your body needs time." His father smiled sadly. "If I rest, what will my children eat?" he asked quietly. Those words broke her heart. She turned away so he would not see the tears in her eyes. As the weeks passed, his father's condition became worse. The little money they had was spent on hospital visits and medicine. The doctor looked at the family with pity. "He has high blood pressure," the doctor explained. "Years of stress and too much hard work have damaged his health. He needs rest, good food, and regular treatment." Stanley lowered his head. Good food? Regular treatment? They could barely afford one meal each day. How could they pay for medicine? His mother began working even harder. She stayed longer in the market. She returned home tired every night, yet she still cooked for her children with a smile. One evening, Stanley found his father sitting alone outside their small house. The old man was looking at the sky. "Dad," Stanley said softly, sitting beside him. His father placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "My son," he said, "promise me something." "I promise, Dad." No matter how hard life becomes, never stop being honest. Never stop working hard. Education and good character will take you farther than stealing or cheating. Stanley's eyes filled with tears. I will never disappoint you. His father smiled. I know you won't. A few days later, Stanley returned home from school and saw many people gathered outside their house. His heart began to race. Women were crying. Men stood quietly with sad faces. His mother was on the ground, crying loudly. Stanley pushed through the crowd. Dad, he shouted. But his father did not answer. He lay still under a white cloth. Stanley fell to his knees. He cried like never before. Dad, please wake up. You promised you would see me become successful. But there was no reply. The family buried him the next day. The small village mourned with them. Life became even more difficult. Stanley's mother became both father and mother to the children. She never stopped encouraging them. My children, she said one night, your father believed in you until his last breath. Do not let his sacrifice be in vain. Stanley wiped away his tears. He looked at his father's old photograph hanging on the wall. With a shaking voice, he made a promise. I don't know how long it will take, but I will work hard. I will change our family story. I will make sure poverty never destroys this family again. His mother hugged him tightly. Neither of them knew that the promise made inside that tiny mud house would one day change not only Stanley's life, but the lives of millions. But before success could come, Stanley would first face years of rejection, disappointment, and painful struggles that would test his faith like never before. Years passed. Stanley never forgot the promise he made to his late father. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise to study. He helped his mother before going to school. After school, he did small jobs in the village to earn a little money. Sometimes he carried bags for traders. Sometimes he helped farmers on their land. Every small amount he earned helped his family. Life was still difficult, but Stanley refused to give up. His mother often smiled proudly. Your father would be happy to see the man you are becoming, she said. Those words gave Stanley more strength. After many years of hard work, Stanley graduated from the university with good results. His family celebrated with tears of joy. His mother hugged him tightly. Today, your father is smiling in heaven, she said. Stanley smiled, but deep inside, he knew another battle was waiting for him. He believed getting a good job would be easy. He was wrong. For months, Stanley carried his file from one company to another. He attended interview after interview. Each time, he hoped for good news. Each time, he returned home disappointed. We will call you. You are qualified, but we have chosen someone else. There is no vacancy. Those words became part of his daily life. His transport money finished, his clothes became old. Sometimes he skipped meals just to print another copy of his CV. One evening, he returned home looking tired. His mother placed food before him. My son, don't lose hope, she said. Stanley forced a smile. I won't, Mama. I promised Dad that I would never give up. But that night, after everyone slept, Stanley quietly cried. He wondered if all his hard work had been for nothing. Days later, his phone rang. It was his old university friend, Daniel. Stanley, Daniel said happily. My brother, how are you? I am fine, Stanley replied, though his voice sounded weak. I heard you are still looking for a job. Yes. Forget looking for jobs here. Come to Lagos. I have someone I want you to meet. He owns a business and needs honest people. I believe this opportunity can change your life. Stanley became silent. He had almost no money. Traveling to Lagos seemed impossible. That evening, he told his mother about Daniel's call. She walked into her room and returned with a small piece of cloth. Inside it were a few old Naira notes. This is all I have, she said. Stanley quickly shook his head. No, Mama, this is your market money. His mother smiled. My son, money can come back. Opportunities do not come every day. Go. I believe God is opening a new door for you. Tears filled Stanley's eyes. He hugged his mother tightly. The next morning, she stood by the roadside waving as the old bus carrying Stanley disappeared into the distance. Neither of them knew that the poor young man leaving the village that morning was beginning a journey that would completely change his life. But in the busy city of Lagos, new opportunities would also bring new challenges, new friendships, and decisions that would shape his future forever. The old boss finally arrived in Lagos after many hours on the road. Stanley looked through the window with wide eyes. Everything was different from his village. Tall buildings stood everywhere. Cars filled the busy roads. People walked quickly from one place to another. Everyone seemed to be chasing something. As Stanley stepped down from the bus, he held his small traveling bag tightly. This was all he owned. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Stanley!" He turned around. It was Daniel. The two friends hugged each other happily. "My brother, welcome to Lagos," Daniel said with a big smile. "Thank you," Stanley replied. "This city is even bigger than I imagined." Daniel laughed. "You will soon get used to it. Come, let us go home." Daniel lived in a small rented apartment. It was not fancy, but it was clean. He gave Stanley a place to sleep and shared everything he had with him. Stanley was deeply grateful. The next morning, Daniel took Stanley to meet his boss, Mr. Bello. Mr. Bello owned a growing company that bought and sold building materials. After listening to Stanley speak, Mr. Bello smiled. "Daniel has told me many good things about you," he said. "He says you are honest, hardworking, and disciplined." Stanley nodded respectfully. "I will do my best if you give me a chance, sir." Mr. Bello looked at him carefully. "I cannot offer you a big salary now, but if you are willing to learn, I will teach you everything I know about business." Stanley's face brightened. "Thank you, sir. I will not disappoint you." From that day, Stanley worked harder than anyone else. He arrived before everyone. He swept the office when necessary. He arranged goods in the warehouse. He followed delivery trucks. He learned how to talk to customers politely. He learned how to keep business records. He watched how Mr. Bello made smart decisions. Whenever others rested, Stanley was learning. Whenever others complained, Stanley was working. Months turned into years. Mr. Bello noticed Stanley's honesty. Many times, customers mistakenly paid extra money. He always returned it. One afternoon, Mr. Bello called him into his office. "Stanley," he said, "people like you are rare. You remind me of myself when I was young." Stanley smiled. "You have taught me that a good name is better than quick money." Mr. Bello nodded proudly. "You are ready for something bigger." He gave Stanley a chance to manage one part of the business. Stanley accepted the responsibility with joy. Under his leadership, sales increased. Customers trusted the company even more. The business continued to grow. One evening, Mr. Bello handed Stanley an envelope. "What is this, sir?" Stanley asked. "It is your reward," Mr. Bello replied. Inside was more money than Stanley had ever held in his life. Tears filled his eyes. The first thing he did was send most of it to his mother in the village. When she received the money, she cried with happiness. "My son," she whispered, holding the phone, "your father would be so proud of you." Stanley smiled, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. He had learned how business worked. He had gained experience. A new dream was growing in his heart. He wanted to build a business of his own. But starting his own company meant taking a big risk. If he failed, he could lose everything he had worked so hard to achieve. And the decision he was about to make would change his life forever. Stanley could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about the dream growing inside his heart. He was grateful to Mr. Bello for giving him a chance when nobody else believed in him. But he also knew he wanted to build something of his own. The next morning, he prayed quietly before going to work. "God, please guide me. I don't want to make a mistake." Later that day, Mr. Bello noticed Stanley looked worried. "Stanley," he asked, "what is on your mind?" Stanley took a deep breath. "Sir, there is something I have wanted to tell you." "Go ahead." "You have been like a father to me. You taught me everything I know about business. I will always be grateful. But I have a dream. I want to start my own company." For a few seconds, the office became quiet. Stanley feared Mr. Dello would become angry. Instead, the older man smiled. "I have been waiting for this day," he said. Stanley looked surprised. "You have?" Mr. Bello nodded. A good teacher should not keep his student beside him forever. He should prepare him to stand on his own. "I knew one day you would be ready." Stanley's eyes became wet. "Thank you, sir." Mr. Bello opened a drawer and brought out a small file. "This contains some contacts that may help your business. I am also giving you a small amount of money as support. It is not a loan. It is my gift to you." Stanley was speechless. He stood up and hugged the older man. "I will never forget your kindness." A few weeks later, Stanley rented a tiny office. The paint on the walls was old. The furniture was simple. There was only one small desk, 2 plastic chairs, and a second-hand laptop. It was nothing like the big companies in Lagos. Still, Stanley smiled every morning when he opened the office door. This is the beginning, he told himself. Business was slow. Some days no customer came. Some days he made only a small profit. There were moments he wondered if he had made the wrong decision. But he remembered his father's words, "Never stop being honest." He remembered his mother's sacrifices. He remembered Mr. Bello's kindness. Instead of giving up, he worked even harder. He treated every customer with respect. He kept his promises. He never cheated anyone. Slowly, people began telling others about the honest young businessman. One customer became 10. 10 became 50. 50 became hundreds. Within a few years, Stanley opened another office, then another. His company expanded into real estate, transportation, agriculture, and manufacturing. Money started flowing into his accounts. He bought his mother a beautiful house in the village. He bought her a new car with a driver because she no longer needed to suffer in the market. When she entered her new home for the first time, tears rolled down her face. "My son," she whispered, "you have fulfilled the promise you made to your father." Stanley smiled with joy. Soon, newspapers began writing about him. Television stations invited him for interviews. Business leaders wanted to meet him. Before long, Stanley became one of the richest businessmen in Nigeria. He owned luxury houses, expensive cars, private jets, successful companies. He had everything money could buy. Everything. Except someone who truly loved him. Little did Stanley know that the next chapter of his life would not be about making money. It would be about protecting his heart from people who only saw him as a walking bank account. Stanley had become one of the richest businessmen in Nigeria. His companies continued to grow every year. People admired his success. Many young people wanted to be like him. Wherever he went, people recognized him. But when he returned to his beautiful mansion every evening, the house felt empty. He had money, he had success, he had respect, but he did not have someone who truly loved him. One afternoon, Stanley attended a charity event where successful business owners donated money to help poor children go to school. That was where he met Stephanie. Stephanie was beautiful, polite, and easy to talk to. She came from a decent family. She respected her parents. She had good manners. Unlike many women Stanley had met, Stephanie did not ask him for money. Instead, they spent hours talking about family, hard work, and their dreams. Weeks later, they started dating. Stanley was happy. For the first time in many years, he believed he had finally found real love. Stephanie also loved him sincerely. She cared about his health. She reminded him to rest whenever he worked too much. She visited Stanley's mother, who quickly grew fond of her. "My son," his mother said one evening with a smile, "this young woman has a kind heart. Don't lose her." Stanley smiled. "I pray she never changes." Sadly, someone else was watching their relationship with different thoughts. Her name was Mercy. Mercy was Stephanie's closest friend. She loved expensive clothes. She loved luxurious restaurants. She loved taking pictures in beautiful places. Most of all, she loved spending other people's money. One afternoon, Mercy visited Stephanie. After seeing the flower Stanley had bought for her, Mercy frowned. "Is this all Stanley gives you?" she asked. Stephanie looked surprised. "What do you mean? He is one of the richest men in Nigeria. Why are you living like an ordinary woman?" Stephanie laughed. "I don't care about his money. I love him." Mercy shook her head. "You are making a big mistake. If I were you, I would enjoy everything. Ask him for designer bags. Ask him to buy you a new car. Ask for expensive vacations. Rich men are meant to spend money." Stephanie smiled and changed the topic. But Mercy did not stop. Almost every day, she filled Stephanie's mind with the same words. "You deserve more. Ask for bigger gifts. Collect money. Enjoy his wealth." Slowly, Stephanie began to listen. The simple, content young woman Stanley had fallen in love with started changing little by little. And Stanley was about to notice that change.
At first, the changes in Stephanie were very small. One evening, she smiled and said, "Stanley, my phone is getting old. Can you help me buy a new one?" Stanley smiled. "Of course. If it will make your work easier, I will gladly get one for you." Stephanie hugged him happily. "Thank you." Stanley did not think much about it. A few weeks later, she asked for a designer handbag. Again, Stanley bought it for her. Soon after that, she wanted expensive shoes, then expensive jewelry, then a weekend trip to a luxury resort. Stanley continued giving because he believed love meant caring for the person you loved. Whenever Stephanie received money or gifts, Mercy celebrated with her. "My friend," Mercy would say with a laugh, "you are dating a billionaire. Enjoy your life." Stephanie started taking Mercy shopping. She paid for Mercy's clothes. She bought Mercy expensive bags. She even paid for Mercy's restaurant bills using the money Stanley gave her. Mercy was happy because someone else was paying for the lifestyle she always wanted. As time passed, Stephanie stopped appreciating Stanley's kindness. Instead of saying, "Thank you," she started saying, "What else did you buy for me?" Nothing seemed enough anymore. One Saturday evening, Stanley invited Stephanie to dinner. As they ate, she looked at him and said, "Stanley, I saw a luxury car online. I really like it." Stanley smiled gently. "That's nice." She looked at him expectantly. "So, when are you buying it for me?" Stanley was surprised. "You already have a good car." "But this one is better." Stanley remained quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, "Stephanie, I didn't mind helping you, but lately every conversation we have is about money or expensive things. I miss the woman who was happy just spending time with me." Stephanie frowned. "So you're saying I ask for too much?" "I'm saying I miss the simple and humble Stephanie I first met." Stephanie folded her arms. "You are a billionaire. Why are you acting like buying me nice things is a problem?" Stanley's heart became heavy. This was not the woman he had fallen in love with. When they left the restaurant, he sat alone in his car for a long time. He remembered how peaceful their relationship used to be. Now it felt like every meeting came with another request. Days later, Stanley visited his mother. She noticed his sadness on his face immediately. "My son," she asked, "what is troubling you?" Stanley sighed deeply. "Mama, I don't know if Stephanie still loves me or if she loves what I can give her." His mother held his hand. "Money is a good servant, but it is a terrible master. Take your time. Watch people's character carefully before making big decisions." Stanley nodded. That night, he could not sleep. For the first time since they started dating, he wondered if his mother was right. Was Stephanie still the kind woman he first met? Or had someone quietly filled her heart with greed? He decided he would not rush. He would watch her a little longer. And what he would soon discover would break his heart more than he ever imagined. After talking with his mother, Stanley decided not to make any quick decisions. He still loved Stephanie. He hoped the woman he first met was still somewhere inside her heart. So he became quieter. He stopped buying expensive gifts every week. He wanted to see if Stephanie would still be happy simply spending time with him. The change was almost immediate. One afternoon, Stephanie called him. "Stanley, my friend Mercy and I want to travel to Dubai for a short vacation." Stanley replied calmly, "That sounds nice. So, when will you send the money?" Stanley was silent for a few seconds. "Stephanie, I don't think now is the right time." Her voice changed immediately. "What do you mean?" "I think we should slow down on spending. We have not even talked about our future together in a long time." Stephanie became angry. "You can afford it. Why are you behaving like this?" Stanley answered gently. "It is not about whether I can afford it. It is about what our relationship has become." She ended the call without saying goodbye. That evening, Stephanie met Mercy. As soon as she finished telling her what had happened, Mercy frowned. "I told you not to let him get comfortable," Mercy said. "He is a billionaire. If he truly loves you, he should give you everything you ask for." Stephanie nodded slowly. "You are right." From that day, she became even more demanding. She asked for more money. She asked for more expensive gifts. Whenever Stanley said no, she complained. She no longer asked how he was feeling. She no longer cared if he had eaten. She only wanted to know what he would buy next. One weekend, Stanley invited her to a quiet restaurant. Stephanie smiled as she arrived. She believed another expensive surprise was waiting for her. Instead, Stanley looked at her with sadness. "Stephanie," he began quietly, "I have something important to say." She smiled. "What did you buy this time?" Stanley lowered his head. "Nothing." Her smile disappeared. "I have spent many nights thinking about us," Stanley continued. "When we first met, you loved me for who I was. We laughed together. We dreamed together. But now, almost every conversation is about money." Stephanie quickly interrupted him. "So you are counting everything you have spent on me?" "No," Stanley replied. "I am asking myself whether you still love me." Stephanie folded her arms. "You are overreacting." Stanley shook his head. "I don't think so." A tear rolled down his face. "I still care about you, Stephanie, but I no longer feel loved. I feel used." The restaurant became very quiet. After a long silence, Stanley spoke again. "I think it is best for us to end this relationship." Stephanie's eyes widened. "What?" Without another word, Stanley stood up and slowly walked away. For the first time since they met, he did not look back. Stephanie sat there in shock. She believed he would return. He never did. When she called his phone later that night, he did not answer. Days turned into weeks. Stanley never came back. Only then did Stephanie begin to think deeply about everything that had happened. She remembered how happy they once had been. She remembered Mercy's constant advice. Slowly,
She realized she had allowed greed to destroy the best relationship of her life. She cried bitterly. "I have made the biggest mistake of my life," she whispered. But some mistakes cannot be undone. And while Stephanie was drowning in regret, another woman was about to enter Stanley's life. Unlike everyone before her, she would know nothing about his wealth. Her name was Victoria. Several months passed after Stanley ended his relationship with Stephanie. Although he focused on growing his businesses, the pain in his heart did not disappear. He had truly loved Stephanie. He had imagined spending the rest of his life with her. Now, those dreams were gone. One evening, his close friend Daniel visited him. "My brother," Daniel said, "you cannot lock yourself inside work forever. Life must go on." Stanley smiled faintly. "I am trying." Daniel nodded. "I know someone I would like you to meet. Her name is Victoria. She is beautiful, educated, and hardworking. I think both of you will get along." At first, Stanley refused. "I am tired of relationships." But after much encouragement, he agreed. A few days later, Daniel introduced them at a quiet restaurant in Lagos. Victoria was confident and fashionable. She spoke politely, and the conversation flowed easily. Stanley thought she seemed different. After several weeks, they started seeing each other. In the beginning, everything appeared normal. Victoria always talked about living a soft life. She loved luxury hotels. She loved expensive clothes. She loved fine dining. Stanley did not pay much attention because he believed everyone had different tastes. One afternoon, while they were having lunch, Victoria looked at Stanley and smiled. "I saw a beautiful diamond necklace yesterday," she said. "Really?" Stanley replied. "Yes, I want it." Stanley laughed softly. "You really like beautiful things." "I do," she answered proudly. "Life is too short to live small." Stanley bought the necklace. She was happy. A few days later, she wanted a luxury wristwatch. Then she wanted a brand new SUV. Then she wanted an expensive vacation outside Nigeria. Each request was bigger than the last. Stanley became quiet again. The painful memories of Stephanie returned. One evening, he asked Victoria gently, "If I were not rich, would you still love me?" Victoria laughed loudly. "What kind of question is that?" "I just want an honest answer." She smiled carelessly. "Stanley, let us be realistic. Every woman wants a comfortable life. I cannot suffer with any man." Those words pierced Stanley's heart. "So," he asked quietly, "if I lost everything tomorrow, what would happen?" Victoria shrugged. "I would move on with my life. Love alone cannot pay bills." Stanley looked at her for a long moment. He finally had the answer he was looking for. He paid the restaurant bill, stood up, and said calmly, "Victoria, you have been honest with me and I appreciate that. But we are looking for different things." Victoria frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want someone who loves me, not my bank account." Her face changed. "Are you breaking up with me?" Stanley nodded. "Yes." Without anger or insults, he walked away. As he drove home, he felt both sad and relieved. That night, he stood on the balcony of his mansion, looking at the city lights. He whispered to himself, "Does true love still exist?" The next morning, he visited his mother. She listened quietly as he told her everything. When he finished, she placed her hand on his shoulder. "My son," she said gently, "not every woman is the same. Do not let 2 bad experiences close your heart forever. One day, God will bring the right woman into your life. Be patient." Stanley sighed deeply. "I hope you are right, Mama." But as he drove back home, a new idea filled his mind. If women kept falling in love with his money, then perhaps he needed to hide his wealth completely. The plan that entered his heart that day sounded strange.
It sounded risky, but it might be the only way to discover who would truly love Stanley the man, and not Stanley the billionaire.
For many days, Stanley could not stop thinking about the idea. He had been hurt twice. Stephanie slowly allowed greed to destroy their love. Victoria openly admitted that she wanted a wealthy man. Stanley was tired. He wanted a wife who would love him even if he had nothing. One evening, he drove to his mother's house. She welcomed him with a warm smile. "My son, you look worried again," she said. Stanley sat beside her. "Mama, I have made a decision." His mother looked at him carefully. "What decision?" "I am going to hide my wealth." She looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I want to meet a woman who will love me without knowing I am rich. If she accepts me when she believes I am poor, then I will know her love is real." His mother remained silent for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "It is not a bad idea, but remember one thing." "What is that, Mama?" "Do not use the test to hurt an innocent person. If you find a good woman, be honest with her at the right time." Stanley nodded. "I promise." The following week, Stanley invited his closest friend, Daniel, to his office. After listening to the plan, Daniel laughed in surprise. "My brother, only you could think of something like this." "I am serious," Stanley replied. "I can see that." Daniel became thoughtful. "If this is what your heart truly wants, I will help you." The plan began immediately. Stanley rented a tiny one-room mud house deep inside a thick forest outside the city. The house looked forgotten. The roof was rusty, the walls were cracked. There was no electricity. There was no running water. The road leading to the house was rough and lonely. It looked like the home of a man struggling to survive. Stanley also rented a small room near a local mechanic workshop. Every morning, he wore old clothes covered with grease. He repaired cars with the other mechanics. He greeted customers politely. Nobody recognized him. His luxury suits disappeared. His expensive watches stayed locked inside his mansion. His convoy of luxury cars was replaced with an old motorcycle. Only Daniel knew the whole truth. Everyone else believed Stanley was an ordinary mechanic trying to make a living. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Many customers came to repair their cars. Some greeted Stanley kindly. Some ignored him because they believed he was poor. But Stanley never became angry. He smiled and treated everyone with respect. A bright Monday morning, a beautiful young woman drove into the workshop. Her car suddenly stopped on the busy road and someone directed her to the mechanic shop. She stepped out of the car with a worried look on her face. She greeted everyone politely. "Good morning," she said with a smile. The other mechanics were busy. Stanley walked toward her. "Good morning, madam," he replied kindly. "What seems to be the problem?" She smiled back. "My name is Charity. My car suddenly stopped on the road. I hope it can be repaired." Stanley opened the bonnet and carefully checked the engine. After a few minutes, he smiled. "Don't worry, it is not a serious problem." As Charity watched him work, she noticed something different about him. Although he dressed like a poor mechanic, he spoke with confidence. He was calm, respectful, honest. He did not try to cheat her. He explained every repair clearly before doing it. When the car started again, Charity's face lit up with joy. "Thank you so much," she said. "You are welcome," Stanley replied with a smile. As she drove away, neither of them knew that this simple meeting would become the beginning of a beautiful love story. And for the first time in many years, Stanley's heart quietly whispered that perhaps true love had finally found its way to him. After Charity drove away, Stanley stood quietly beside the mechanic workshop. He watched her car disappear down the busy road. For some reason, he could not stop thinking about her.
She had been polite. She had greeted everyone with respect. She had not spoken to him as if he was less important because he was a mechanic. That was rare. Stanley smiled to himself and returned to work. Meanwhile, Charity was driving home, but her mind was also on the young mechanic. "There is something different about him," she whispered. "He speaks well, he is calm, he is honest." A few days later, Charity's car began making another strange sound. Instead of going to another workshop, she drove straight back to Stanley. When she arrived, Stanley smiled. "You are back." Charity laughed. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all. Let me check the car." After a careful inspection, Stanley discovered that the problem was very small. "It will only take a few minutes," he said. As he walked, they talked. Charity told him she worked as an accountant in a private company in Lagos. She said she loved living a simple life. Stanley listened carefully. When she finished, Charity smiled. "What about you?" Stanley had already prepared his answer. "I have been working here for some years. It is not an easy job, but I thank God I can take care of myself." Charity nodded. There is dignity in honest work. Those words touched Stanley deeply. Many people looked down on mechanics, but Charity did not. When the repair was finished, she asked, "How much do I owe you?" Stanley mentioned a fair price. Charity paid without arguing. Then she added a little extra money. Stanley quickly returned it. "You paid more than the repair cost." Charity smiled. "Keep it." Stanley gently shook his head. "I cannot collect money I did not earn." Charity looked at him with surprise. Very few people refused extra money. She smiled again. "You are an honest man." Stanley simply replied, "Honesty costs nothing." From that day, Charity found reasons to visit the workshop. Sometimes she came because of her car. Sometimes she only stopped by to greet everyone on her way home from work. Each visit brought them closer. They talked about family, they talked about growing up, they talked about dreams and life. Stanley noticed that Charity never laughed at poor people. Whenever an old customer could not pay immediately, she quietly encouraged Stanley to be patient. One afternoon, an elderly woman came to repair her motorcycle. She did not have enough money. Some mechanics wanted to send her away. Charity quietly paid the balance without telling anyone. The old woman thanked her with tears. Stanley watched everything. He said nothing, but deep inside, he was impressed. That evening, Daniel visited the workshop. Stanley told him about Charity. Daniel smiled. "Be careful, my friend." Stanley laughed. "I am only getting to know her." Daniel looked at him seriously. "Just don't let your heart run faster than your plan." Stanley nodded. "I won't." But as he watched Charity drive away again that evening, he could not deny the truth. For the first time since his painful relationships with Stephanie and Victoria, his heart was beginning to open again. What Stanley did not know was that someone had quietly noticed the growing friendship between him and Charity, and that person was about to create unexpected problems for both of them. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Charity and Stanley became very close friends. Whenever Charity had free time after work, she stopped by the mechanic workshop. She always greeted everyone with a smile. The other mechanics liked her because she treated everyone with respect. One afternoon, Charity arrived carrying a small bag. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said happily. "Good afternoon," the mechanics replied. She walked over to Stanley and handed him the bag. "I noticed you hardly take a break," she said. "So I brought you lunch." Stanley looked surprised. "You didn't have to do this." Charity smiled. "I wanted to." Stanley thanked her sincerely. As they sat under a tree beside the workshop eating together, they laughed and talked about their childhoods. Charity told Stanley that she had lost her father when she was very young. Her mother had worked hard to raise her and her younger brother. "That is why I respect hard-working people," she said. "I know how difficult life can be." Stanley listened quietly. He admired her kind heart even more. From that day, they began speaking on the phone almost every evening. They encouraged each other, They prayed for each other. They shared their dreams. One Saturday, Stanley invited Charity to a small local restaurant. It was simple but neat. As they ate, Charity smiled. "You always make me feel comfortable." Stanley smiled back. "You do the same for me." There was a short silence. Then Stanley took a deep breath. "Charity, yes? I have something to tell you." She looked at him patiently. "I know I am only a mechanic. I don't have much money. I cannot promise you a luxury life. But every day I spend with you makes me happy." Charity's heart beat faster. "I care about you," Stanley continued, "more than a friend." He looked into her eyes. "I love you." For a few seconds, Charity said nothing. Then a gentle smile appeared on her face. "I was wondering when you would finally say it," she said softly. Stanley blinked in surprise. "You mean I love you too?" Stanley could hardly believe what he had heard. His face lit up with joy. For the first time in many years, his heart felt at peace. From that day, they officially became a couple. Their relationship was simple. They took evening walks together. They visited Charity's mother. They prayed together. They laughed together. Whenever Stanley was tired after work, Charity encouraged him. Whenever Charity had a difficult day at work, Stanley listened patiently. Neither of them knew that love was quietly growing stronger every day. But not everyone was happy for them. One afternoon, Charity told one of her colleagues about Stanley. The colleague laughed loudly. "You mean your boyfriend is a mechanic?" Charity nodded proudly. "Yes." The woman shook her head. "You are too beautiful to suffer with a poor man. You can easily marry a rich businessman." Charity smiled calmly. "I am looking for a good husband, not just a rich husband." The woman laughed again. "We shall see." Unknown to Charity, those words were only the beginning. Very soon, many people around her would begin putting pressure on her to leave Stanley because they believed he was too poor. Would Charity remain faithful to the man she loved, or would she also choose wealth over true love, like the women Stanley had loved before? Charity and Stanley's relationship continued to grow stronger. Every day, they found new reasons to smile. They respected each other. They trusted each other. Most importantly, they never pretended to be someone they were not. One Saturday afternoon, Charity invited Stanley to her mother's house. Her mother welcomed him warmly. "My daughter has told me a lot about you," she said with a smile. Stanley greeted her respectfully. "Good afternoon, Ma." They sat together and talked for a long time. Charity's mother noticed how politely Stanley spoke. She noticed how he listened without interrupting. Before he left, she called Charity into her room. "My daughter," she said quietly, "that young man may not have money today, but he has good character. Never look down on an honest man." Charity smiled. "Mama, I love him because of who he is." Her mother hugged her happily. "I pray God blesses your relationship." A few days later, things became difficult. Some of Charity's friends found out that Stanley worked as a mechanic. They could not believe it. One afternoon during lunch break at work, one of them laughed. "Haha, Charity, are you serious?" "About what?" Charity asked. "You want to marry a mechanic?" Another colleague shook her head. "You have a good job. You are beautiful. You deserve a rich man." A third person added, "Love is good, but love cannot pay bills." Everyone laughed except Charity. She looked at them calmly. "I am not dating his pocket. I am dating his heart." They laughed even louder. "Let's see if you will still say that after marriage," one of them replied. That evening, Charity told Stanley everything. Stanley became quiet. He looked at the ground for a few seconds. "Maybe they are right," he said sadly. Charity immediately held his hand. "No, but I am just a mechanic. So what?" I cannot give you the kind of life those women are talking about. Charity smiled gently. Stanley, when I first met you, I saw something many people no longer have. What did you see? I saw honesty. She continued, you respect people, you work hard, you are humble, you fear God. Those things are more valuable than money. Stanley's eyes became wet. No woman had ever spoken to him like that. Charity smiled. If we have peace in our home, we can build everything else together. Stanley looked at her with deep emotion. For the first time since he started pretending to be cool, he began to feel guilty. She had accepted him exactly as she believed he was. She loved him without asking for expensive gifts. She never complained about his small room. She never asked why he could not buy luxury cars. She simply loved him. As they walked home that evening, Stanley quietly made a decision. If Charity continues to stand by me, he thought, I will soon tell her the whole truth. But before he could reveal his secret, someone from Stanley's past unexpectedly saw him walking inside the mechanic workshop. The person stopped walking. Their eyes became wide with shock. They whispered, "That can't be Stanley, one of the richest men in Nigeria." The secret Stanley had carefully protected was now in danger of being exposed. The man who had stopped outside the mechanic workshop could not believe his eyes. He looked again. It was Stanley, the same Stanley whose face often appeared in newspapers and on television, the same Stanley who owned companies across Nigeria, the same billionaire everyone admired. The man quickly brought out his phone. He wanted to take a picture. Before he could do that, Daniel saw him. Daniel quickly walked over. "Good afternoon," Daniel said politely. "Can I help you?" The man pointed at Stanley. "Isn't that Mr. Stanley?" Daniel smiled. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you have mistaken him for someone else." The man looked confused. He stared at Stanley again. Since Stanley was wearing dirty overalls and his face was covered with engine oil, the man finally shook his head. "Maybe I made a mistake." He walked away. Daniel breathed a deep sigh of relief. Later that evening, Daniel told Stanley what had happened. Stanley became quiet. "My secret cannot remain hidden forever," he said. Daniel nodded. "And Charity deserves to know the truth before someone else tells her." Stanley looked at the sky. "I know." The whole night, he could not sleep. He remembered every moment they had shared. He remembered the day she brought him lunch. He remembered how she defended him before her friends. He remembered how she accepted the little house in the forest without complaining. She had passed every test. The next morning, Stanley called Charity. "Are you free this afternoon?" he asked. "Yes," Charity replied happily. "I want to take you somewhere special." She smiled. "I'll be there." A few hours later, Stanley picked her up. Instead of riding his old motorcycle, he hired a taxi. Charity looked surprised. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," Stanley replied with a gentle smile. After some time, the taxi stopped in front of a tall glass building. It was one of the biggest office buildings in Lagos. Charity looked around in confusion. "Why are we here?" "I have someone I want you to meet," Stanley said. She followed him inside. The receptionist immediately stood up. "Good afternoon, Chairman," they said respectfully. Charity looked behind her. She thought they were greeting someone else. There was nobody there. Stanley simply smiled and continued walking. As they entered the main office, employees quickly stood up. "Welcome, Chairman." "Good afternoon, sir." Managers rushed forward to shake his hand. Security officers saluted him respectfully. Charity froze. Her heart started beating fast. She looked at Stanley. Then she looked at the employees. Nothing made sense anymore. One manager smiled at her. "Welcome, ma'am. It is an honor to meet the chairman's guest." Charity slowly turned to Stanley. Her voice shook. "Stanley?" He looked at her gently. "Yes?" "Who are you?" Stanley took a deep breath. He held her hands softly. With tears already forming in his eyes, he said, "I am sorry for keeping this secret from you. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to know if someone could truly love me without seeing my wealth. Charity could not say a word. She stood there in complete shock. The man she believed was an ordinary mechanic was actually one of the richest businessmen in Nigeria. And at that moment, Stanley knew there was only one story left to tell. The painful truth about his childhood, his father's death, Stephanie, Victoria, and the reason he tested the woman he loved.
Charity stood silently inside the magnificent office. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She looked at Stanley. Then she looked around the luxurious building once again. Finally, she spoke. "So, you are really the chairman?" Stanley nodded gently. "Yes." "You are a billionaire?" "Yes." Charity remained quiet for a few moments. Stanley's heart started beating very fast. For the first time since meeting Charity, he was afraid. Not because she would reject him, but because she might never trust him again. "I'm sorry," Stanley said softly. "I know I should have told you the truth earlier." Charity looked into his eyes. "Why did you hide everything from me?" Stanley took a deep breath. "My father died because of poverty. My mother suffered to raise us. I worked hard until I became successful. But after I became rich, many people stopped seeing me. They only saw my money." He continued, "I truly loved Stephanie. At first, she loved me too, but her friend Mercy filled her heart with greed. Soon, nothing I gave her was enough. I ended the relationship." He lowered his head. "Then I met Victoria. She never hid the fact that she loved luxury more than she loved me. That relationship also ended." He looked back at Charity. "I became afraid that true love no longer existed, so I dressed like an ordinary mechanic. I rented that small house in the forest because I wanted someone to love me for who I am, not for what I own." Charity wiped away her tears. "You know what hurts me?" Stanley looked worried. "I thought you didn't trust me." "I was afraid," Stanley admitted. "Please forgive me." Charity smiled through her tears. "I forgive you." Stanley looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes." She held both of his hands. "I never loved you because of money. I loved you because you are kind. You respect people. You are honest. You care about others. If you had remained a mechanic forever, my answer would still have been the same." Stanley could no longer hold back his tears. He hugged Charity tightly. For the first time in many years, he felt completely at peace. A few days later, Stanley took Charity to meet his mother. The moment his mother saw them together, she smiled. "My son," she said happily. "Is this the young woman?" "Yes, Mama," Stanley replied. Charity knelt respectfully to greet her. "Good afternoon, Mama." Stanley's mother quickly lifted her up and hugged her. "My daughter, I have prayed for this day for so long." With tears of joy, she added, "Thank you for loving my son before knowing about his wealth." A few months later, Stanley and Charity had a beautiful wedding. Family members came from different parts of Nigeria. Friends filled the hall with laughter. Daniel stood proudly beside Stanley. Mr. Bello smiled as he watched the young man he once mentored begin a new chapter of life. Stanley's mother could not stop crying tears of happiness. "My husband," she whispered as she looked toward the sky. "Our son kept his promise. He has made us proud." Meanwhile, Stephanie was scrolling through social media when she saw pictures from the wedding. She froze. Tears filled her eyes. She remembered the days Stanley loved her with all her heart. She remembered how Mercy had convinced her that money was more important than love. She covered her face and cried. "I lost a good man because of greed." Mercy also saw the wedding pictures. She lowered her head in shame.
My selfish advice destroyed my friend's future, she said quietly. Victoria also heard the news. She sighed deeply. I spent my life chasing money, she whispered. I forgot that good character is more valuable than wealth. Years later, Stanley and Charity built a peaceful home filled with love, trust, honesty, laughter, and respect. They welcomed children into their family and raised them to value kindness over riches. Stanley never forgot where he came from. He built schools in poor communities. He paid hospital bills for families who could not afford treatment. He created scholarships for children from struggling homes, just as his parents had once dreamed for him. Charity stood beside him in every good work they did. Together, they proved that true success is not measured only by money, but also by the lives you touch. And they lived happily, not because they were rich, but because they trusted each other, forgave each other, and built their home on genuine love. Moral lesson: money can attract many people, but only true character reveals genuine love. Wealth may open doors, but honesty, humility, kindness, and respect are what build a happy home. Never choose a person because of what they have. Choose them because of who they are.